All right, we got another interesting business here today. This one is a digital marketing agency with what is claimed as 95% recurring revenue and 1 million in SDE, asking as they structure it here three times. So asking $3 million, cash flow a million, established 2016. So pretty decent track record here, doing 2.2 million in revenue. Low client concentration, 14% growth, 95% recurring revenue. When you're doing digital marketing, SEO, advertising, content creation, it should all be recurring revenue. So this is kind of a marker that doesn't really matter. What's more relevant here would be if they had like a churn or a retention, and they said 95% of customers retained over 12 months. That is huge, but low customer concentration is good at that because 2.2 million is a pretty decent amount. You don't want to be having five customers making up all the difference. 14% growth, not horrible year over year at this size. It's more than decent. And so asking 3 million, down payment 2, seller carry note 1 million for 5 years. So here's the thing: when you encounter this, and this is mainly why I think this is interesting, right? They're asking three times basically, at least what they state. 5 years, 3%. This is more than reasonable. There's two scenarios here where this makes sense. One is the seller is very amendable and is under an emergency to get this thing sold, or retiring and they want the right transition. One of those two scenarios, which is less likely, to be honest. The secondary scenario is this 14% growth is maybe only this past year, but the previous year they made no money. And so when you look at the average the last 3 years, they didn't make enough that the SBA is going to underwrite 2 million, which is why they're offering such a heavy amount of seller carry. Because 33% seller carry is not normal by any means. That usually means that there's some historical issues in financials, which is the reason why they're offering it. Now that said, but million 5 years, 3%, not a bad negotiation. If this is a deal I was doing, I would not pay 3% interest. 3% is just so ridiculously tiny anyway, so they should be okay without it. 5 year balloon, more than fine, as long as it's deferred and delayed to the lender as per norm with an SBA deal, where you basically have a full deferment, basically meaning no payments for 2 years, then you pay afterwards. And usually with those types of deals, what you really want to do, as long as you're structuring well, because it is all about getting a good deal, you defer for 2 years and then you just refinance after 2 years to pay off the seller note if the seller's been good effectively. But let's see here. So they're dealing with big brands. That's not always a great thing, as much as most folks might think it is. Folks not in the agency space will think this is great. Folks in the agency space knows this just looks like a nightmare. Comprehensive suite of services: digital advertising, SEO, content creation, social media management. Again, if you're in the agency space, this looks like a nightmare. If you're not in the agency space, this probably looks really good. Uh, those who know. This, though, basically is the tell-all of this, right? Revenue 1.079. Where's that discrepancy of half the revenue? SDE 1.079. Maybe he actually just copied and pasted incorrectly here, but this also doesn't match here either. So first flag for sure. Proven growth 8%, 14% in 2024. 2024 hasn't even finished yet, so to be determined what that means, but also why is there no 2023? Another flag here. Why is there no mention of 2023? So interesting nonetheless. So we got a few flags. Looking at it from the agency perspective, this is a flag, this is a flag, this discrepancy is a flag. No 2023, that's a flag. Talking about growth for 2024 is semi-flag, only because maybe they are just doing really well this year, and so they want to highlight that. That's okay. But not mentioning the previous year, that's a red flag for sure. Or as close to a red flag as you can get. It's not quite a hard red flag. And what I mean by flag is just things to investigate. but things that you definitely need to be aware of that might kill the deal. Um, Scalable operations structured for expansion, remote team. That's great. Always nice. Means that this doesn't make sense, to be blunt. 33% seller carry when you have the entire US and really the world as your buyer list. Um, you generally don't need aggressive structuring to get a deal done. So it's somewhat interesting, somewhat a flag in itself. Um, Having experience in digital marketing, this as much as for a general buyer, this might be a flag. For someone coming from the agency space, that's not a flag. That means that they know that someone coming in without that experience is going to shit the bed. Like they're going to the deal's going to be dead. But the other hand, what this also means is their buyer pool is definitely not as big as it otherwise would have been. But it also means the owner is probably taking on a lot of responsibility in the business. So that to me tells me the SDE, and I'll explain this when I go through the numbers, it's probably nowhere near this. Probably 30% discount, maybe 40% discount in real EBITDA, in real cash flow. It's definitely not going to be that. Seller financing available. They already explained that's fine. And 4 week support included, not horrible. 23 employees, not bad. Reason for selling personal matters, so it probably justifies up there what I mentioned with the seller finance. Otherwise, nothing else really standing out here. But let's look through the numbers. So $3 million in revenue, 1.079 being the actual 2023 here. Cash flow actual, I just discounted 30%. That might even be not aggressive enough. To be honest, it might be more like a 60 or sorry, a 40 or 50% discount. But let's say it's 30%. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt there. Asking 3 million, they're basically asking 4 times. You're going to pay for due diligence. You got to pay for the SBA fee, loan origination, closing costs. We'll assume in this case they're going to give you 3 months working capital as part of the deal, which I mean you should be negotiating anyways. We'll assume that. However, if you didn't, assuming that this 2 million is the actual revenue number, you're probably needing at least 300 grand in working capital, 250 to 300 grand. But let's say you don't need that. Let's say you're not paying a buy side advisor. SBA loan, we'll do our standard here, not this 90-10 garbage that brokers love to push and everybody else loves to push. 80-20. That's what you want. You need to be de-risked. 90-10 does not de-risk you at all. That's how you go broke. So 80-10 or 80-20. Seller finance, 600,000. We're not going to do interest on that. 2-year deferral. I mean, it's 3%. They shouldn't have an issue, giving that up. Financing, you're doing 2.5 million as a loan. The rest seller finance. So you're basically financing and funding 3.1, give or take. 3.2. Yeah, 3.2. Monthly debt payments, 35 grand, 400,000 in debt service, and your debt service ratio 1.75, more than solid. Many lenders that we're coming up on these days, they don't want 1.25. They don't want the SBA minimums anymore. They want 1.5 times. They want anything over 1.5 times. They won't touch under 1.5 times. Despite that being what the SBA says they can do, a lot of these lenders just don't want it. It's getting risky out there as they see it, especially with a lot of these guys, how they're selling off mortgages and loans and all that in the economic scenario, what's going on right now. They want to be more de-risked, and 90% government backing or 80% government backing on their loan is still not enough de-risking, even as they see it. So that's why we want to be in line with them, right? So 80% government backing, great. We'll give that as cash. 20% that's actually backed by us when we come in and buy. We're going to seller finance that. We're going to make sure we're de-risked there. Annual cash flow 324, not bad at all, assuming that everything else checks out. But I would say, a worst case scenario here is probably more that this gets discounted by half, because it's highly potential that they just, brokers do it all the time. Worst comes to worst, you got to finance your own $350,000 in working capital. Let's say you're still not working with anybody to help you through that process. You're getting everything else mid, guarantee fees and due diligence and all that. 30 grand for the size of company. It might be a little bit high, to be honest, probably about half that, but it is what it is. So in that scenario, you're financing 3 million plus the seller finance. And so your debt service ratio is dead in the water, basically. So the big thing that you're going to have to do in this process, this is the deal that you're after. And so, for one of our partners, it probably will be a deal we look at. We got to make sure that the cash flow that they list is actually close to accurate, 70+% accurate. If it's under 70+% accurate, it's a dead deal to us. We wouldn't bother. Or we might go for it, but then say, hey, you got to leave, 4 or 5 months working capital. Like we're not going to be able to do a line of credit and all of a sudden be able to pay it off. It's just not going to happen. So, not a bad deal otherwise, assuming that you can get to 70+% accuracy on this cash flow, at least 750,000, and assuming that you can get them to leave working capital. The interest rate's 3%, doesn't really matter that much, but if you can get them to leave that off, all the better. In which case, this could be a good deal. But big flags for sure are, these are flags in themselves dealing with bigger brands. Bigger brands, first thing they're going to cut when their profits down for the quarter is agencies. They're going to cut external. Full service, that means a lot of people. Revenue recurring doesn't matter because it's basically a fake number there. But growth, 2022, no 2023, and highlighting 2024, that in itself, another flag you got to look at. So not a bad deal. Definitely some things to be investigated, but could be really good if you have that agency background and you're looking for either additional acquisition or you're looking for that next business. I mean, this could be a really good starting point.